Good afternoon and welcome to this week's Daily Mirror Cost of Living question and answer session, where each week we discuss all the latest financial and money updates, as well as running through all the ways to save you money. I'm Levi Winchester, the money editor for the Daily Mirror website, and this week I am joined by Dr. Steve Buckley, who is head of data science at money saving app Loop, and he's who we'll be speaking to all about energy bills this week. So thank you so much for joining us, Steve. It's really great to have you with us.
Thank you very much for having us.
So yes, we'll be chatting all about energy this week. As always, if you have a question, then please use the comments box below or email us at mirror.money.saving@mirror.co.uk. So this week has been particularly cold across lots of parts of the UK. And of course, this is normally the time of year when people reach for that thermostat to turn their heating on. But this winter is obviously very different, with energy bills having rocketed over the last year. Many people are obviously understandably extremely worried about how they can afford to heat their home right now. So just to put this into a bit of context, households are currently covered by the Energy Price Guarantee, which has capped energy bills at £2,500 a year for the typical household. Of course, it's not quite as simple as that. There isn't actually a cap on how much you can pay for energy. Instead, what the Energy Price Guarantee does is it caps the unit rates you can be charged for gas and electric, along with the standing charges, much like the Ofgem price cap used to. So this 2,500 figure is used to illustrate a household with typical use. And then from April, this sort of headline figure will rise to £3,000. So this is where we are currently at, with households paying obviously substantially more for their energy than what they used to. Now, the big question we're all asking is there an end in sight? The past few weeks, we've seen wholesale energy rates have dropped rapidly, and this is understandably sparking a lot of questions about what this means in terms of what we're paying for and whether our bills could potentially go down this year. So my first question to you, Steve, and it's quite a big one to start with, is what is going on with wholesale energy prices, and why are we seeing them start to fall?
Yeah, as you say, the actual costs of the wholesale markets have fallen over the last few months. But to put that in some context, they rose so quickly over the back end of 2021 and early 2022. They're still something like 3 times what they were before that rise in 2021. So you say they come down quite substantially over the last few months, but they're still a long way above what they were before. And so in terms of how this feeds through into your bill, well, it's particularly gas prices that are high. And gas prices also set the cost of electricity. So because they've been so high over the past few months, the way the Energy Price Guarantee works and the Energy Price Cap works the Energy Price Guarantee in particular, it limits what the supplier can charge you. Obviously, if prices are lower for that supplier, then they would be able to go underneath it. Because they've been so high over the past 12 to 18 months, there's still some time for that to sort of work through the system and to see prices come down. So unfortunately, what we're more likely to see is see price actually rise from April, when the Energy Price Guarantee goes up to £3,000. We may see some drops towards the sort of second half of the year, so from June onwards, but we don't expect them to be substantial. And there's still significant pressure on getting gas, particularly in Europe, and that's going to continue keeping those prices, although they're lower than they were, substantially higher than they were prior to 2021.
And what exactly is it that is causing wholesale prices to drop?
So it's really a shortage of gas in Europe. So before Russia invaded Ukraine, Europe got a substantial portion of its gas through pipes coming from Russia into Europe. That's been substantially reduced since that war last February, last March when it started. And they're being replaced mainly by imports through ships. And there's just a higher price to pay for those imports. They're both more expensive logistically. You've got to build a big ship, you've got to power that ship, you've got to move it across the ocean, but also you're then competing with lots of other countries for that gas. So you're competing with Asia and lots of other countries, and it is just more expensive.
And I know we've just touched on the kind of impact it could have potentially on energy bills. Are we starting to get a clearer picture of what is going to happen to energy bills over the next year or so, or is there still a lot of time to go before we really get that better picture?
So we can say with more certainty what's going to happen in the near term. So for domestic consumers, so for normal people with their household energy bills, that will stay protected by the energy price guarantee through till June. For the next 3 months, it's going to be at that £2,500 level. And then from April through to June, it's going to be the £3,000 level. And in fact, it's going to be protected at that level through for longer than that. But we're kind of hopeful that maybe those prices will fall a little bit below the £3,000 for the rest of the year. So it is still substantially more expensive than it was. I think before the crisis, it'd been closer to £1,000, that average bill. And of course, if you're using more gas, you're using more electricity than average, you're seeing an even bigger impact on your bills. And we see at Loop, we see some people who really are struggling, both people with larger or poorly insulated homes where they're using lots more gas, lots more electricity, but also people, just average homes. It's just a big shock, isn't it, when it's all tripling in price?
No, absolutely. We just had a comment actually from one reader, Linda Colissimo, hopefully I pronounced that correct, saying that her energy bill is £500 a month for 2 pensioners, which is obviously you can see why people are so worried right now. Third of their income, she's saying.
Yeah, I mean, if you compare that to the state pension, if you just had the state pension coming in, that would be more than half of your income. So yeah, it can be a real challenge to people. I would say it is important to make sure you are keeping yourself warm, particularly during these cold snaps. But there are things you can do. So our Loop customers, we're an energy saving app. If you download and use it, on average, we see our customers reduce their electricity use by about 15%, their gas use by about 10%. So for that average home, we see a saving about £300. Just, I guess, by understanding a bit more about how you use energy and what you can do to reduce your use.
No, definitely. I think that's a very very valid point, is that there are lots of things we can do to lower our energy bill. And as you rightly said earlier, Steve, it is all to do with, your consumption. If you use less energy, you'll pay that little bit less. So what we'll move on to now then is some more kind of practical questions. So what are some of the best and easiest ways to lower your energy bill right now?
So I think the first thing to do is understand how you use energy. I think for lots of people, the way you interact with paying that bill is you get a bill maybe once a month, maybe once every few months. And you don't really know how you spent it. It's not like you're going to the supermarket and you can see I've spent this much on bananas, this much on baked beans. So using an app like Loop, and there are others around, you see your energy use in much more detail. So we show you how much electricity, how much gas you use every half hour of every day. And from that, you can start to correlate, when am I using energy? You can also see things like what we call your phantom load. So that's the energy, or the electricity in particular, that you just have on all the time. So some things like fridges, freezers, maybe Wi-Fi, you want on all the time. We found lots of users where they've got lots of devices that actually use a lot of energy, but they don't realize. So these can be things like old set-top boxes, old desktop computers in particular. They can be costing hundreds of pounds a year to run. So by understanding what your phantom load is, by using an app like Loop, seeing whether it's high or low compared to other people, and if yours is high, you can find out what those things are that are causing it, and turn them off, and that can make a substantial difference. On the heating front as well, there's lots of things you can do that are relatively cheap or free to reduce how much gas you're using. So if you turn your thermostat down by a degree, that's going to reduce your gas use by around 10%. So for an average home, that's about £120. So if you can add more layers so you can stay warm, and it's still comfortable, turning it down by a degree, 2 degrees, 3 degrees, it can really add up to quite a substantial saving. You can also do things like draft proofing. So it's important not to block drafts that need to be there. So things like air bricks you want to leave alone. But if you've got gaps around doors, around windows, you can get some very simple DIY solutions to fix those for just a few pounds, and they'll make you both feel warmer, so feel more comfortable. They'll also reduce your gas use.
We've seen a lot of people as well doing, very clever things when it comes to draft proofing their home, such as using an old jumper that you stuff with socks and then you tie up there. I think a lot of people will probably be quite surprised by how many sort of DIY solutions that they can do around their own home with stuff they've already got.
Yeah, absolutely. There's some really ingenious stuff out there, and it doesn't have to cost very much money at all, or it can be stuff that you already have available. I think it's just understanding what you need to do and that impact, and it can make a real difference.
No, absolutely. And one phrase just I'd like to talk about now that we have seen a lot of in the last few months is vampire appliances. And am I right in thinking this is linked to your kind of phantom load, as it were? And if so, what exactly are these kind of vampire appliances that, we all perhaps maybe leave on a bit too much? And, what kind of impact are they having on our bills?
Yeah, absolutely. I think phantom loads are our name for vampire appliances. So I suppose that it really breaks down into two things. So there are things that you probably know you have on all the time, and some of those you definitely need to have on, but maybe they're not working properly and they're using more than you'd expect. So fridges, freezers, and maybe if you've got an old fridge, an old freezer in a garage you're just leaving on, maybe that's not actually working that well, and that could be adding a lot to your bill. Then you have things that you could turn off, and some of them use a lot of power, some of them don't. So things like modern electronics, things like phone chargers, they really don't use very much power. So you really don't save very much by turning them off. But some of the older appliances, things like old set-top boxes, DVD players, potentially desktop computers, games consoles, particularly if they get warm, if you feel them and they get warm, that's a really good sign that they're using quite a lot of power. So I think using something like Loop to help you diagnose those, if you've got a smart meter, using the in-home display, going around turning things off, seeing if that live usage reduces, it's a good way of identifying it and making a lasting difference. Because once you've identified it, you turn it off, you're going to make that saving going forward.
No, absolutely. And just reading a comment here from a viewer, Liz Sherwin, it's hard when you're disabled and you use more energy. And I, can completely imagine, it's so hard for people right now, particularly if you've got high energy use, and you're going to be using more. It can be quite tricky, can't it? Sometimes there are simply things when you've got health complications that you can't switch off.
Yeah, absolutely. You're often at home a lot of the time as well, so you need to keep the house warm to keep yourself safe, and you may have appliances that need to plug in to keep yourself healthy as well. And it can add up. I think there is some specific support out there, but it won't be enough for everybody.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So what we are going to move on to next then is the help that you can get, particularly if you are struggling right now. So Steve, do you want to run through some of the support that is available if you are really, worried and struggling with your energy bills?
Yeah, sure. So I think the experts on this are people like Citizens Advice. So everyone has access to Citizens Advice. They've both got a website and you can phone them. They often have offices in locations as well. I think the first thing is to make sure you are getting the benefits that you can. So whether that comes from sort of universal credit through to the winter fuel allowance that pensioners get, and the cost of living payments as well that have been coming through this spring. I think there've been two payments, one this spring and one last year. So making sure you get those payments. If you do get into arrears on your energy, it is always worth talking to your supplier and seeing what they can do. Typically, they will at least help you go onto a payment plan so that you can pay that debt back over time. If you have wider issues, maybe wider issues caused by the cost of living, because of course it's not just impacting energy. Again, Citizens Advice can give you lots of help with that. There are debt management agencies that can help. Some of those are free, some of them are charities, some of them you have to pay for, but they can help just consolidate any outstanding debts that you have and get yourself into a position where you can agree a payment plan with those people. But yeah, so as I say, I think the main thing is to make sure you are getting the benefits that you're entitled to, and then going to the right people, I think, for help.
No, absolutely. And just a note on benefits, there are lots of free benefit calculators online that are, they only take 5-10 minutes to use. So, if you think you might be missing out on some money that you could potentially be entitled to, it's well worth spending just 10 minutes of your time using one of these calculators. But then also always follow up with a free charity like Turn to Us or Citizens Advice, just because they'll be able to help you run through what the calculator has provided you with, the answers, and they'll be able to run through and help you actually put the claim in for any potential benefits that you could be entitled to. So that's a really good point, Steve, about definitely look for all the different ways you can get help and all the entitlements you could get. What I'd like to just flag up as well is there are lots of government schemes as well that are in place to help people with energy bills. So there is obviously, like you mentioned, Steve, there's the cost of living payment. So it's well worth going back through. We've got lots of guides on Mirror Money about all the cost of living payments that came out last year and who was entitled to them. So it is well worth looking through them, checking just to make sure you didn't miss out on anything, and then also checking what is going to be happening this year. So there are several more payments due. So there is a £900 payment for those who are on certain types of benefits. Then there is another £300 pensioner cost of living payment and another £150 disability cost of living payment. So it's well worth keeping an eye out for when we have some dates for when they are going to be being sent out to eligible people, because at the moment we've only been given sort of rough time frames, sort of spring, autumn. So keep an eye out for the eligibility dates and make sure you can claim what you're entitled to. A few other schemes as well that are out there is cold weather payments. So obviously this week it's been particularly cold. Cold weather payments give you £25 for every 7 days where the temperature falls or is forecast to fall below 0 degrees. Sorry, it should be 0 degrees or less. So £25 for every 7 consecutive days as well, worth keeping an eye out for them. You've also got the warm home discount scheme and the winter fuel payments as well. Warm home discounts worth £150. Winter fuel payments are worth £300. So it's well worth, again, having a little Google, having a little search and seeing what other help you could be entitled to. I know, Steve, you mentioned about speaking to obviously your supplier as soon as possible, and that's, again, really good advice as well. If you're struggling, don't leave it too long. Get in touch and they should be able to sort you out with a payment plan and some other support as well. So what type of support does your energy supplier have to offer you, Steve?
Yeah, so I guess in terms of what they have to offer you and what they can offer you, so some of them will have hardship funds, and they're more discretionary and they can help some of their customers in particular need and potentially write off some of that debt. I think that there are specific areas around the supplier has to maintain a supply to your property, unless certain conditions are come under. So you shouldn't be worried about contacting them that you'll lose supply. That definitely shouldn't happen. Certainly not in the first instance. And that should really be the very last thing that's possible to happen. As I say, yeah, they should be helping you manage that debt. They may look to, I guess, move you on to a different type of payment. So if you're on a direct debit at the moment, there's a lot of controversy about this, but they may well try and move you onto a prepayment method. So that, in a sense, puts you in more control, I guess, of how much you're spending. So rather than seeing that bill come in, it's a surprise at the end of the month. It means you have to pay up front. As I say, it is slightly controversial, that move, but that is something they may well do.
I think obviously the reason why that is controversial is obviously prepay is more expensive than paying by direct debit. So that's one thing obviously to consider when thinking about that as well. And I know you mentioned as well, Steve, about there being free organisations people can speak to if they're looking to get help with their energy bills. So a few of them would be sort of Citizens Advice, Step Change. And it's so important, isn't it, for people to speak out as soon as possible? Because I think there's still this sort of stigma of, when you're struggling with bills, you don't want to talk about it. But, times are so hard right now for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think getting the best advice as well is important. And the earlier you do it, the more options you'll have. So that's definitely worth doing. I suppose one of the other areas where people can get help on the longer term is there are grants out there to help you upgrade your home, particularly if you're low income, so if you're in receipt of benefits. There's a scheme called ECO that could get you insulation added to your house, which would reduce how much it's going to cost to heat in the future. So they're definitely worth looking into. And there's a new scheme launching probably in April or May this year called Eco Plus, which should expand that scheme out into away from just low-income households and include middle-income households as well. So that should lead to much more loft insulation and cavity wall insulation being funded by the government.
And that's a really good bit of advice, because, as you said, the older your home, the less kind of energy efficient it's going to be, and it's these people that are probably struggling the most right now.
Absolutely, and it just makes you warmer as well. I think that's the great thing about insulation. It's not just that it cuts your bill; it also just makes the house more pleasant to live in, and it's a long-term solution. You do it once, and then it's there, and you can enjoy the benefits of it just every winter going forward.
No, definitely. I think a lot of people are under the misconception that energy improving your home costs a fortune when it doesn't have to. Like we were saying earlier, there are so many cheap ways you can make your home warmer. I mean, one way that I can sort of think of is if you've got floorboards where a lot of draft is coming up, something like a really thick, heavy duty rug can be quite a reasonably priced solution. I mean, just for anyone who wasn't tuned in earlier, Steve, what other kind of cheap ways are there to kind of make your home just that bit warmer? And where are the kind of the danger points, as it were, where you're going to be getting a lot of cold leaking in?
Yeah, so I think there's a few things. So one of them is the boiler flow temperature. So this is a setting on your boiler which determines how hot the water is going into your radiators. So there's a really nice tool on a charity called Nesta's website that will show you how to do that. And what you do is you effectively reduce down that temperature, and it means your boiler will just be a bit more efficient. And we'd expect to see reductions in energy use of something like 9% if you do that. There's also draft proofing. So draft proofing strips are super cheap, or you can make them yourself. And you can put those wherever there's a draft there shouldn't be. So around doors, windows, those kind of areas. There's of course just turning down your thermostat. So if you can add more layers to yourself, if you can use things like hot water bottles to keep yourself warmer, then you may still be comfortable at a lower temperature. And every degree you turn that thermostat down, you're going to save around 10% on your gas bill. So for the average house, that's about 120, 130 pounds per degree. So yeah, as I say, it's just getting the right thing for you, really.
I think that's a really good reminder as well about layering up and hot water bottles as well. I mean, it's definitely something that I've tried to be more conscious about. When you're sat at home and you think, oh, actually, I'm getting a bit cold. I've sort of been trying to put an extra layer on, wrap up, because we're just so much more conscious now, aren't we, as a nation? Of I don't want to just reach for that thermostat just yet, but as we said earlier, there are some cases where certain families, if you've got disabilities or health complications, it's not always as easy as just sort of turning it down. So it's really important to keep that thermostat where you're comfortable, but also, as you said, Steve, try and, if you can turn it down that 1 degree, you will obviously see the benefits.
Yeah, and if you get an app like Loop as well, you can see when your heating's actually on. So one thing we see with a lot of customers is it's just like optimizing exactly when that heating is coming on. They look at their gas use and they go, why was it on that day when I was out? And because you've got that data to hand, you can see it, you can start correcting it. And that can lead to quite big savings. If you're not heating the house while you're out at work or while you're away at family, particularly on a day like today, it can save you several pounds. And that really adds up over the winter season.
And do you see a lot of your customers adjusting their energy use based on having that knowledge of just exactly what they're using?
Yeah, exactly. I think you really learn quite quickly as you can see your own usage. How am I using it? How can I change? So we see really big changes. We see people save up to 40, 50% on their bills if they're doing things they just didn't realize were using lots and lots of energy. So that just by, I guess, educating yourself, by becoming informed, you can make all of these changes. And a lot of them don't, they don't affect your comfort. Heating your house while you're not in, it's just a waste of money. So if you can find out exactly when you're doing that and stop it, you can see how much you can save. It can really add up to a decent saving.
So is it fair to say that knowledge is power? Use the
in this
pun
case,
in this scenario.
That's definitely the case. Yeah.
No, absolutely. I think the key sort of take home I would give to anybody right now, obviously worrying about their bills, is please obviously do reach out, as we spoke about earlier. Speak to your supplier as soon as possible, and just get as much help as you are entitled to. There's a lot of information out there, and as well, I think don't get tied into this stigma that if you're in debt or you're worrying about money, that's something to be ashamed of, because it's absolutely not. And as you said earlier, Steve, everyone's very worried right now. So hopefully by running down some of these tips and some of this help, be able to inspire a few people to speak out if they are struggling.
Yeah, I hope so. And also, talk to friends and family about it. I think it's not something we normally talk about, how we use energy, but you'll find that people will be using a lot more than you or a lot less than you, and sharing that knowledge. How is my neighbor use 20% less than me? Sort of just understanding how people are making those savings. it can really help and get a bit of a sense of community as well.
Do you know, it's funny you should say that, because the amount of like friends I've had in the last sort of over the last few months just saying to me like, how much is your energy bill? And it's weird, because a year ago it's probably something we would never think to ask people, is it? But everyone is so concerned about what they're paying that it does help if you know someone, particularly if it's someone in a similar living arrangement as you, in the same kind of, like, if it's a 1-bed flat, 2-bed house. It is really helpful, isn't it, to know what other people are paying?
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the strongest reactions we ever get when we talk to our customers is particularly those ones that use more energy than average. When we tell them, we can see how much you're using, we can see how that compares to other people. You're using quite a lot. People are really surprised. I don't think anyone really understands how their use compares to others. And once you know that you're above average, the question is why, and you can start to motivate yourself to find those reasons, and that's a really good driver to find where areas where you're wasting money, wasting energy, that you can stop.
No, absolutely. Just because I am conscious we are very or nearly almost out of time, just again want to reiterate to anyone who is worried about their energy bills, like Steve said, talk to someone, talk to your supplier, and make sure you are getting all the help that you are entitled to. And I think as well, Steve, like you said, knowledge is power. Take a look at your consumption, take a look at all the ways you can be cutting back, all the changes you can make, and crucially, hopefully there'll be a lot of things as well that you can change and they won't impact your lifestyle too much as well, which is a really important thing to take home.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us, Steve. It's been really, really good talking to you, and really, really interesting as well. And here's hoping the next 12 months will be a lot better than last year was, because I think we all need it, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Steve. And we'll be back next week for another cost of living question and answer session. Thank you so much for watching, everyone.